Hello, and welcome back to the God the Artist podcast. I'm your host, Morgan McCarver, and today we are talking to very special guest, Briana Bass. Briana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Morgan. Thanks so much for having me.
I am really looking forward to talking about your Christian fiction book series. That is something that I think we need more of in the world.
Yeah, I can't wait to tell you more.
Perfect. Well, tell us how you first knew that you were a writer and then how you came about writing this series.
Oh, goodness. So I am kind of a stereotype. Like many other authors, I've been writing since I was a kid. I was always writing, silly little stories or acting out silly little plays that I wrote for my parents. And so it was just a talent, a gift that I'd always possessed. I decided pretty early on that I was going to be an English major and I was going to, go to New York and get a job with a publishing house and write my manuscript on the side. And this very like 1990s idea of what being a novelist looked like. Um, God had other plans. And after college, I actually ended up working in higher education for a little over 10 years, which I loved. It was great. But my writing was pretty limited to emails. I
Mm.
wasn't doing a whole lot, even just on my own as a hobby. And I kind of thought that that dream had died. And then COVID hit, and I was working for an online university, which was really great because we were remote before remote was a thing. Um, but everybody decided, oh, now's a great time to take online college classes. And we became very busy, and I quickly became very burnt out.
Mm.
Um, and I reached a point where I just knew it was time to move on. But I had no idea what I wanted to do next. I had worked in higher education for like I said, over a decade, and I was very active in youth ministry with my church, and I'd been active in youth ministry in a couple other denominations as an advisor as well. And so I was kicking around like, should that be the next direction? I just wasn't sure. So I actually ended up spending all of Lent of that year in prayer and meditation, just asking God to point me in the right direction. Where did He want me to go? What did He want me to do? And it was that act of surrender, just total surrender of my future, that really changed everything and brought me back to writing. And what's really interesting about it, you can look back and see God's fingerprints, right? All over your life. And for me, it was just how everything dovetailed into this new career as a full-time independent author. So it took, the writing gift that God had already given me, but also working with youth and young adults in my church life. I knew that that was really the age group that I wanted to write for. Because I don't just write fiction, I also have some nonfiction things, devotionals, resources for women's ministry, along that line. So I knew I wanted to write for those women. And, all of these elements of my life just sort of came together in this beautiful career. I will say I did not originally intend to write romance. Um, that I was the kid that read, Narnia and Lord of the Rings, and I really thought that that was going to be more what I would write, at least initially. Um, but God was like, well, you love Disney and Hallmark movies and happily ever after, so let's do this. And I said, okay. So I wrote small town contemporary Christian romance and small town contemporary Christian college romance. And then the romantasy has kind of happened in the past couple of years, where just some opportunities, some doors have opened, and now I get to explore that side as well.
That is awesome. And I love how you really had your demographic before you even started writing. And you kind of knew what they would like, their interests, tastes, and could kind of cater to that while you were writing. That is a way that I never even thought going about that, but that's awesome.
It's so helpful to know who your ideal reader is. Not to say that you can't write what you want to write. Certainly you can. But if you want it to be a sustainable long-term career, you really need to write. We often say in the industry to market, which really just means that you're meeting genre expectations, you're meeting reader expectations. You don't necessarily have to do what's trendy. I know I'm involved in some closed door bookstagram groups, and they love hockey romance. I am not a hockey romance girl personally. So I will not be writing hockey romance. Um, so you don't have to necessarily write to the trends, but you do have to write to those expectations. And knowing those in advance is so helpful. And creating sort of an ideal reader avatar is really helpful too. So
Mm.
mine is named Emma. She has a name. And she's in her early 20s and she's just starting her career. But she has very fond memories of her college experiences. And she's not really sure who she is yet. She's in that transition period of figuring out who she is as a person, as a woman, as a daughter of God, really exploring her relationship with Christ and what that's going to look like moving forward. Because as we grow and change, that relationship grows and changes, which is beautiful. So that really does help to kind of narrow down not just what you're writing, but your approach to it overall.
Right. And do you like to have structure when you write and story map and everything, or do you really let the characters decide what happens?
Oh goodness, no, I have to have a plan. I am a plotter. I there are elements where I will allow the characters to kind of reveal some bits and pieces to me as we go, but overall, I have to have a plan. I tend to write out of order, so I don't start in chapter one and just go all the way through. I like to have a nice solid outline before I get started. It also, I have found it very helpful. If I know how the story ends, I can pepper in some foreshadowing as we get there.
Mm.
And that's been quite helpful. But I respect those who just sort of wing it. I that actually terrifies me. I cannot do that.
Yeah, no, that terrifies me too. Um, so when you're starting to write these books, do you automatically see these as a series, or were you writing one to see how well it was going to do first?
So I knew right out the gate that this was going to be everything I write is going to be in series. Um, and that's a business strategy, actually. With series sell very well. It's a great way to, if you can get someone into book one, you can get them to read through to book two and then to book three and then to book four. If you've created a universe, and universe is used very lightly, this is not, it doesn't have to be fantastical. It can be a fictional small town like what I have. But you've created this world that can be quite immersive. Readers want to linger, they want to stay there, they want more stories from your fictional town or your fictional family, or however it is you're structuring your series. And that just ends up being a really great marketing and business strategy. Um, and I have found great value in that. I know other authors who have had great experience with that. So for me, I always start out with knowing that I'm going to write a series, which also helps with planning because I know who's going to be in which book. Um, so I know like which couple is going to feature in each book, but I also know side characters who might pop in like book one and book three, and maybe, this other character's in book two and book five. And so it just helps me with sort of mapping it all out, and sort of keeping straight who is doing what. It also helps to make sure that I'm not mischaracterizing a character who might have been featured in book one and then just has like a cameo in book four. Even things down to like eye color and hair color, right? Like that's so easy to mess up from book to book. So I like to write in series. I've just found that it works for me, both from a business perspective, but then also from the writing perspective.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Let's talk about how your books have been received. Do you do like festivals like some of the guests I've talked to, or are you more like face to face?
So Most of what I've done so far has been online. I am going to do some church bazaars, like holiday, fall festivals, here later this year. Um, my plans kind of derailed a little bit last year. I was dealing with a family issue, and I actually ended up taking like 6 months off of my writing and business and everything.
Wow.
And so a lot of plans that I had for 2025 were pushed to 2026. So a few things have been delayed. But that's the goal for the end of the year is to do more of the church events. I've done a couple, but I really want to kind of amp that up. Most of what I've been doing as far as sales has been online, word of mouth, that sort of thing. My neighborhood, I moved to a new neighborhood about 18 months ago, and a group of us got together for a community event, and everybody knew that I was the author. I was like, I haven't even met any of these folks, and they all know like who I am. So that was really interesting, and that allowed and facilitated for face-to-face conversation, which is definitely my preference. Because I like to just connect and have those relationships. And not to say that we can't establish those online. We certainly can, but it's just not the same as face to face.
I agree completely. So, how was it meeting some fans who were really strangers at that point? Did they offer feedback or were they waiting for the next book?
So they were definitely waiting for the next book. It was kind of the first time that that had happened. Um, Previously, when I've run into people, it's been my church family. So I'm like, they know me, I know them. It's not as sort of jarring as when you're meeting strangers and I'm like, oh, okay, this is how like celebrities feel. And I do not consider myself in that league at all. This is going to take some getting used to. And it's not like I, walked down the street and people recognize me or anything like that, but it was just there are these opportunities that are going to present themselves when you're doing something in person, and you kind of have to just accept that it's going to be a little bit awkward at first. But you can kind of build that confidence and say, okay, you know what, I'm just here to talk about, my books and make sure that what I'm talking about, ultimately is pointing back to the Lord. Um, but it was okay. It was really sweet of everyone to come up, and there were a couple of people who were like, "I'm downloading your book right now," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so sweet." So they were really excited, and we've talked a few times since then, and they're like, "So when's the next book out?" So yeah, that's been really. It's just been so supportive, and that's been really
Mhm.
a blessing.
Yeah, that is so cool. I think that's just amazing. So, how many books do you have in this series and how many do you anticipate?
Yeah, so the way that I've designed it is within this small town of Hollow Bridge, Indiana. I'm doing multiple series, and each series has 6 books. So the first series is a complete series. That's my sort of original Hollow Bridge series. The one that I'm doing right now is my Hollow Bridge College series. And that's 2 books are out as of May, end of May, with the third coming at the end of July, because I like to kind of rapid release them. And then I have 2 more series planned, but the next one won't be even starting until 2027. So a little bit of a wait on that one, because I also have a romantasy series that is launching in 2027. And so my goal is to sort of rapid release the college series, finish it up, get it out in the world so that I can really kind of switch gears and focus on the romantasy, because that's going to be a much bigger launch than what I've done previously.
Wow, I am not familiar with the term romantasy. Is that romance and fantasy, I'm guessing?
Yes, yeah. So it's really more of a marketing term than anything. It's sort of becoming an official subgenre. But yes, so it's a fantasy and romance mashup, where it's like 50% romance, 50% fantasy, and the plot could not exist without both. So a lot of times, like if you read a romance that has like fantasy elements in it, it could still stand alone as a romance, even if you remove the fantasy elements, or vice versa. A fantasy that has romance in it could still stand alone if you remove the romance. With romantasy, they're on an equal footing. And it's really fun. There are some really great closed door and Christian romanticy authors already out there. And I was like, oh, I'm very excited. I have to join them.
Yeah, that must be fun to kind of get on the bandwagon early too.
Yes, so romantasy itself has been around for a couple of years and it's quite popular as far as like secular romantasy. But we are now starting to see more of the closed door and more of the Christian, because not all of the closed door romantasies are Christian, obviously, but a lot of them are. And we're getting to see both, which is just really exciting because closed door and Christian readers, they don't just want what they've always had. They don't want the same old thing all the time. You know, they do want a little bit more diversity of genre if they can have it. So it's like they'll want historical, they'll want cowboy, they'll want I've seen billionaire Christian romance out there. I mean, it really does, go all the way across the genre spectrum. So yeah, I'm happy to be able to add to everyone's enjoyment.
Where do you fall in that category of the fantasy? How did you come up with which version you want?
Yeah, so everything I do is always going to have that faith element to it. So it's always going to be the closed door Christian romantasy. The way that I approach it, I know that in some Christian circles, this can be a bit of a hot topic, right? This idea of like fantasy and magic and that sort of thing. But I approach it in a very, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis kind of way, where I'm really letting the fantastical be a vehicle for spiritual truth.
Mm.
It can be allegorical, it can be metaphor. You're really using it to reveal the Lord's character. And it also helps, I think, sometimes with um, certain Bible passages that are maybe a little bit difficult to wrap our heads around. Maybe there's a historical context that we're missing, or it just doesn't quite land the way that we are hoping that it would. By sort of transitioning it to a more fantastical world, sometimes it's just a little bit easier to understand or to digest. So
Mm.
that's the approach that I take with it.
Okay. So are we expecting to see like you had mentioned magic, so any kind of like um magical creatures, or is it more like humans doing magic?
So it's a bit of both. So there are magical creatures, sort of my spin on a couple of magical creatures. And then yes, there is an incident where humans start to exhibit certain magical powers that they really shouldn't have. So that's a big problem in the story.
Mm.
So it's a bit of both. Um, and I will say that the magic that is wielded is really rooted in spiritual gifts. So things like prophecy and healing, those are really what I'm trying to incorporate. All of it at the end of the day ultimately is going to go back to scripture.
Mm.
Uh, that's the basis, that's the foundation, no matter what.
I love that. Have you seen any pushback as a Christian author, just in the secular community?
Yes. So, unfortunately, yes, that is something that I've experienced. And that was actually quite challenging at the very beginning of my author journey. I felt a bit like I was on an island.
Mm.
I was involved in various writer groups, and communities and wonderful people, but they wrote very secular. Particularly a lot of the other romance authors were not closed door. Let's just put it that
Mm.
way. And were definitely times where when I would say, "Oh, I write Christian romance," you could kind of just see the look on the other person's face because you'd either be in person or on a Zoom call or something like that, and um, they would kind of just shut down. And I'm like, you don't
Mhm.
even know me. Like the entire conversation that we would then have would have nothing to do with religion and was never going to have anything to do with religion. It was like about marketing or something. And, uh, but they heard Christian and just sort of shut down. I was like, oh, okay, this is a little awkward. Um, But then I met some other Christian authors, and I was like, oh, good. I've found some people who I can relate to. And it does help for, I think, a better understanding. There are some very general things that any author can discuss, really, regardless of genre. But it does help sometimes to be with other people of faith and to have those conversations because there can be a bit of a difference in how we're presenting ourselves. Being an author, the brand is not my books, the brand is me. And so there are certain things that like I'm not going to post on social media, right? That a secular author might. And so it's just things like that. When you're having those conversations, it does help to be with, people of faith. The other thing though you do run into, of course, are going to be some readers who give you pushback. And there are some who firmly believe that all romance is spicy romance for women, and that there is no such thing as closed door romance, and that it's all bad for us and we shouldn't be reading it. And I'm like, disagree, because I don't write that.
Right, right.
And I know many other authors who do not write, spicy books.
Right.
So there's definitely just some pushback when you say romance as well, that people have this sort of stereotype or assumption that they make. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not it at all. And then with the faith side, sometimes you'll get pushback within the Christian community as well, because you have a different interpretation than somebody else. And for the most part, it's very respectful, and I haven't had a lot of pushback there, but there's been some, and it really does sting when it happens. But, we just have to pray for each other and give one another grace.
How do you deal with negative feedback like that?
I have learned how to deal with negative feedback like that. It is a process. It is not something that you can just snap your fingers and overnight you have changed. I used to be quite sensitive to any kind of feedback. I would have like an annual review at my old job, and I would get so nervous. And I was like, I know that I'm doing a good job, but I would still get very nervous going into it. Because there could be just one thing, and I would just be a hot mess. So I really had to overcome that and really grow in my confidence as a person. And one thing that really helps, of course, is leaning on my faith. And really just taking it to the Lord, because there are times where I can't handle the criticism on my own and I need his strength. And there are other times where it is just like water off my back. I'm like, you know what? To each their own, because, it could just be that person's having a really bad day and, they're lashing out. It could be that what they're saying is actually quite constructive, and I need to listen to it and go, oh, you know what? They have a point. So it is one of those things that I will sometimes still have that knee-jerk reaction of like, oh my gosh, I just want to go cry in a corner. But I have learned to overcome that. And really recognize, where is this criticism coming from? Is it actually constructive, like from my writing group, which it always is, and they're fabulous. I love them dearly. Or is this something that honestly is completely irrelevant to me, is completely irrelevant to my business? I'll just let it go.
That is some great advice. I know as a Christian artist, I get that same kind of response sometimes of, oh, it's Christian art, so it must be white Jesus paintings,
Right.
How do your books kind of change that aspect of the Christian genre being so sappy?
So one thing that I really try to do and be very intentional about is ensure that my characters are real, that they're dealing with real issues and they're living in a real world. Some of my books actually have trigger warnings, not because I have anything graphic on the page, but because they deal with real world issues. I have one where a character has a panic attack. I have another where a character has a medical emergency. So I want to be very just understanding of that could affect some people. But also very upfront and honest and saying, look, this is what you're getting with my books. We're not going to pretend that it's all sunshine and rainbows every day in the world, because it's not. I'm not going to give you an overly sanitized book. Also, if there's no conflict, it's just boring. So I really try to make sure that my characters are dealing with real world issues, but I also try to limit it to what are real world issues that like college students and young adults are dealing with.
Mm.
So it's going to be a lot of focus on family dynamics, mental health, career transitions, that sort of thing. Friendship's a big one as well. So those are what I try to really focus on. But I also try to populate my world with a bit more diversity. So
Mm.
it's a lot of I have interracial couples. I have couples who are of different denominations. So I've got Protestantism, Catholicism, and Orthodoxy all represented. Um,
Wow.
I have characters who are from more rural areas, from more urban areas. I've not done any main characters with any sort of disability, but I do have some side characters who one is deaf and she and her sister use ASL, and it's I write it out in the book. So those are some
Wow.
things that I just want to make sure that I incorporate because that's the world that we live in. I'm not going to pretend that the world is just like one type of person because it's not.
Mm.
And that's one thing that I really try to focus on because I remember going back to the 1990s again, the like very whitewashed, overly sanitized Amish romance. And if that's
Mm.
your thing and
Yep.
you want to read
Yep.
that, more power to you. Like there, you do you. Like I absolutely will support whatever it is you want to read. But that is not what I'm going to write.
Right. Yeah, I grew up with those books, and that's why I said at the beginning, we need more Christian appropriate romance for that exact reason. There's only so much of that I can read, at least.
Yes, agreed.
So, what would you say you want your legacy to be?
I think what I would want would be to empower and encourage other young Christian women on their faith journeys. Um, because
Mm.
it's ultimately not about me, right? It's about the Lord. And if I can help other people to deepen their connection with the Lord, then like I have done my job. And that is however that happens. If it is through, a devotional, if it's through my fiction books, if it's simply me as a role model, which I try to be, I do try, um, then like I've done my job. That is ultimately the goal.
Wow. I think that's amazing, especially like you're saying, it's not just about the books. And I think that's something huge that a lot of authors don't even realize is that they're trying to promote their book and not realizing that it's they're representing themselves too.
Yes, that is key. And we want to be authentic, of course, particularly in this day and age of AI and technology. You really want to make sure that you are showing the world that you are a human, which has pros and cons because I also can't believe that we live in a world where I have to say we have to prove that we're human. But it is the reality. And so authenticity is so important. And I'm never going to pretend to be someone that I'm not, whether that's online or in person. It's just, first of all, it's just not who I am. But also, it's bad for business because you don't want to present yourself one way and then someone sees you out in the world and is like, wait a minute, this is not what you were selling. Like, what's going on here? And again, it doesn't mean that you have to hide who you are. I will post like whatever TV show that I'm, might be watching or book that I'm reading. Like, I'm definitely going to invite you into who I am and into my life and into my world on my terms, obviously. Like, I decide what I post. And I do take safety and security very seriously, particularly as a young woman. Like, that is just not something that I'm going to play with. Um, but, if I go on vacation, when I get back from vacation, I'm going to post some photos. I want to share that with, my friends and my fans. Like that's just something that I feel I is part of being a brand. Of course, it's totally up to, you and what you want to share, what you feel comfortable sharing. But I just don't see why I would want to present something else to the world than my true self.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned you also write nonfiction too. Can you talk about that?
Yes, so I started with a just like a weekly Christian blog, touching on a variety of topics, and I still maintain the blog. But it started with that, and then it grew into two devotionals that the Lord put on my heart. The first was just sort of a general devotional for young women, to just sort of help them nurture their relationships with Jesus. And the other was a devotional for Lent, focusing on the women in the Easter story, and what
Mm.
lessons we can learn from them today. Um, and it was so much fun to write the devotionals. You have to sit down and sort of figure out, okay, well, how do I want to structure this? Because there's so many different formats that you can use. And uh, there's always prayers, though, and you end up writing a lot of prayers. And you end up praying a lot to God to help you write those prayers. You're like, the Holy Spirit has to fill me because I got nothing sometimes. I got nothing. I don't know. But I also like to, one thing that I do, regardless of whether I'm writing nonfiction or fiction, whenever I sit down to write, I always like to start with a prayer and just sort of offer over to the Lord, what is it you want me to say? What is it you want me to write? And just sort of let the Holy Spirit fill me and let those words flow. Um, that has been really great for writer's block, for overcoming
Mhm.
writer's block. But yeah, the devotionals were lots of fun to write. Um, and they make great Christmas gifts. So it was really fun to like talk to people because that's your angle. Because it can be awkward sometimes talking about your books. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Let me tell you this story about this woman from the Bible who I absolutely adore. Usually is going to be Mary of Bethany in my case. And by the way, here's this really great Christmas gift. Like it really did make that conversation a lot easier. Um,
Mm.
but I love writing the devotionals. I'm hoping to one day write more. Uh, Not this year though.
Yeah, it sounds like you're going to be very, very busy this year.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Very busy.
If you had to pick a favorite genre or fiction versus nonfiction, what is your favorite area to write in? Or do you like taking breaks and mixing it up?
I kind of like taking breaks and mixing it up. Um, I will say I probably do prefer ultimately writing fiction because you can write whatever you want. When you're
Mm.
writing nonfiction, even a devotional, you do have to fact check.
Yeah.
And so with what's really great about fiction is that you can kind of do whatever you want. Now that being said, there are certain things where maybe you should do some research. So like for the romantasy that I'm writing, it's not historical fiction or anything like that, but I am setting it in a sort of high medieval fantasy world. And I'm basing it largely off of 13th and 14th century Europe and Britain. So I
Mm.
did quite a bit of research just to help it feel grounded, taking liberties, of course. I say I'm using it for scaffolding because that's really what I'm doing. Um, so in that respect, I still had to do some research. But I
Okay.
also, your hands aren't tied. You can kind of get away with whatever you want to do in your story. And I really do like the freedom that fiction brings you.
Mm. How do you keep all of your characters straight? Are they people in real life that you're basing them off of?
I have an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, for real. I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I color coded it. So each page, I have a page for each series. And the first page is like my main pairings, and they're color coded. So, like, this couple is yellow, this couple is blue, that sort of thing. And then I'll have another page that has all of the side characters. And then I'll actually have another page that has like the buildings. So that, 'cause especially when you're
Mm.
doing everything in the same small town, I want to make sure that the buildings are also consistent from one book to another. So if I say that like the firehouse is here and the church is here, like I need to make sure I have them on the right corners, that sort of thing.
Mm.
Um, and then what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll put in, things like eye color and hair color. Where is this character originally from? If it's like, especially for the college series, very few people go to college in the same town that they grew up in, right?
Right.
And then I'll also put in sort of what are their connections? So I have a couple like sets of siblings in the town, and so it's like, okay, this character is the sister of this character, and that's in the Excel spreadsheet too, so I can keep the family trees straight as well. So if the character wears glasses, if they have, maybe like a scar on their face, whatever the defining characteristic might be, all of that goes somewhere on the spreadsheet so that all I have to do whenever I'm writing is just refer back to that.
That's such a great idea. So organized too. I am amazed that you would have it so organized. But it makes sense. You've got to keep it all straight.
You do? Oh my gosh, I would lose my mind without that spreadsheet.
So I know this is looking into the future, which we really can't do, right? God has thankfully not given us that power. But as as the books kind of progress, they're going to college, and I'm assuming they're going to get older and older. Will you follow these characters through to like senior citizen type age, or where do you see this kind of series going?
Um, it's certainly possible. I don't know that I would do the same characters, say in like their 50s and 60s as main characters. They could certainly pop up as side characters because it's all the same small town. So we can kind of grow with the town rather than necessarily those specific characters. Because I still do want to continue writing for that younger demographic. Now,
Mm.
again, that could totally change as I get older as well. And I might be like, you know what? We're going to write for 50-year-olds. This is what we're doing. But as of now, I don't anticipate doing that. So I can absolutely see them, like I said, sort of popping up, doing cameos, being mentor characters, that sort of thing. But once they've sort of reached that age and that stage of life, they're really not who I want to focus on at that point.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, that is just so exciting, and I can't believe that you're able to keep all of the series straight and do nonfiction and have another series coming out soon. Is there anything else in the works that you've just got another plate spinning in the air for 2028?
Oh my gosh, there's so many plates. So yeah, so like I said, there's two more series that I have planned. Like actually have like outlines and everything within the Hollow Bridge universe. And so I'm looking at 2027 and 2028 for those. The Romantasy series, it's a four-part series, and that one's going to be about 18 months in between books, if not 2 years, kind of just depending on how the scheduling goes with those. Um, but I also have audiobooks coming, which I'm very excited about.
Ooh,
My first series, I'm recording them myself, and it is taking way
good
too
for
much
you.
time. So
Oh,
it it
oh, okay.
it takes so much time because it's not just recording, right? You have to go through and do all the editing and all the technical work and all the specifications. And so I hired an audiobook editor moving forward. And she and I were actually emailing earlier today. So I am so
Hmm.
excited that those are coming. Those are in the works. And then there's a couple short stories for some anthologies that I'm working on as well.
Ooh.
And that's pretty much it as far as writing. Um, the biggest thing I'm doing is this fall I will be starting at my denomination seminary. They have a certificate in theopoetics, and so I'm going to start
Wow.
pursuing that. And so that's going to be taking up quite a bit of my time. So I do have to step back from a few things so that I can prioritize that, which is another reason why I hired the audiobook editor
That
or
is fair.
narrator, I should
I'm,
say.
yeah. No, that completely makes sense. I've never heard of that term though. What did you say? Poetic something?
Yes, theopoetics is a very new and still very emerging academic field that the best, sort of in layman's terms, way to describe it is art and religion. So,
Hmm.
specifically looking at visual art and writing, although I'm sure you could incorporate music and some of the other art media as well. Um, and bringing in sort of looking at them. So some, of course, are very overtly Christian, right? You walk into a church and you see a stained glass window, like clearly that's quite religious. Um, but not all art is necessarily overt like that. or intended even to be religious. And yet, if you have a Christian upbringing, that can still just sort of come out in whatever you're doing, whether you intended it to or not. And so, what a lot of the study is looking at, okay, both sides, right? So the things that are overt and those that maybe weren't necessarily intended to, but still have that faith foundation to them, or at least could be interpreted that way. And so there's writing classes that are part of the curriculum, but it's also like studying poetry and just having conversations about uh, really that intersection of creativity and religion. So I'm quite excited about this.
Yes, that sounds so fascinating. You'll have to come back once you've finished your courses and tell us all about it. I feel like that would just fit right in with the podcast. But good luck to you. That's a very exciting venture.
Thank you, thank you. It's another one of those things that's been kind of in the works for a couple of years, and I finally have time to do it. And I applied and was accepted, and I'm just so excited to get started on it this fall.
Yay! Well, that is so awesome. I can't wait to hear all about it. I'm speechless that that class even exists, honestly. That in this day and time when I feel like everything, especially art, is moving so far away from Christianity, sometimes we can't even see the references. I think that a course like that is definitely needed and extremely valuable.
Hmm.
And it will only affect your books in the best way possible. So, I know we're coming to the end, but I'd love for you to share some advice with our listeners, or any encouragement you have, and please tell us where we can find your books.
Yeah, so as far as advice and encouragement, the number one thing that I would say is that your creativity is a ministry, whether or not you feel like it is. Of anything that we do can be a ministry, and that includes your creativity. And it doesn't have to be a big ministry. You don't have to be famous or have 1,000 followers. Um, because even if you are only helping or blessing one person, and even if that person is just you, it still has value.
Mm.
And partnering with the Lord, using your creative gifts is such a beautiful way to really help build the kingdom and to share God's love and light with the world. So you have a calling, you do, and it doesn't have to be a full-time job. It could just be, for you, it could be a side hobby. However, it ends up sort of presenting itself. Um, Listen to where God is leading you because He will lead you on that right path. So that is my advice, and my encouragement. And as far as finding me, my website is authorbrianabass.com. That's where you can go and subscribe to my newsletter to stay up to date on all the latest news and behind the scenes sneak peeks. And you can also follow me on Instagram at author Briana Bass.
Perfect. Can't wait to get your books and stay in touch with you for the future. Until next time.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Morgan.
Bye.
Bye.